What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Age of Quarantine. I am David Castillo from Saint Vitus. How is everyone doing? Hope you're having a good Monday in this weird, fucked up world. I'm going to be joined today by the one and only Greg Fox. A lot to say. Greg is one of the best drummers around, not only in Brooklyn, but probably in the world, in my opinion. Being involved in a lot of bands, everything from Ben Frost, Uniform, Liturgy, to his own amazing solo work. He just put out a record called Contact. So Greg is a really accomplished musician. He's played with so many people and really stands out on his own, and just an amazing guy on top of it all. So we love Greg. We're super psyched to be talking to him. I think I see him up in this chat right now, so let me see if I can grab him here. Greg, where are you right now? You're in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I'm at my studio.
Studio Tay.
Studio Duh, actually, is how it's pronounced.
Oh, is that how it's really pronounced?
Yeah.
I've been fucking it up for months because we haven't seen each other, which is really fucking sad.
Well, it's spelled T-E, so it is, everybody who hasn't heard me say it thinks it's Tay or Tuh or something like that. But it's Duh, kind of like the Tao is spelled T-A-O.
Okay. That makes sense. I feel that makes sense. That makes sense for you and everything that I kind of know about you. You're like always looking to those sort of philosophies to inform not only your work but your everyday life. So, Greg, we've known each other for a fucking long time. I was just really thinking about it too, because I was listening to Contact today. I was listening to a lot of different stuff that you played on and stuff, and I'm like, wow, I go back with this dude for so long. But that being said, it's really about 11 or 12 years. So, on this show, we like to chart kind of the full course of musical journey. So, you were born and raised in New York. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, I've really only lived in New York City my whole life, except for 4 years that I was in upstate New York in college. But otherwise, yeah, I was born and raised basically in Manhattan, and moved to Brooklyn when I was like 17. And then I've lived in Queens a little bit, but mostly I've been in Brooklyn since I was like 17. Yeah.
Hey, so a life.
Salud.
Oh man, I needed to do it right for my buddy Greg. So we're doing wine to just. It's gonna symbolize how you've aged as a musician over the years, because that's how I feel about it.
Right.
So you're born and raised. So you mean true New Yorker, like native fucking New Yorker, which
fourth generation. Yeah.
Yeah, not the easiest thing to come by, honestly, and someone who's seen the city gone through a lot of iterations. What was kind of growing up like and finding music? When was like your earliest experiences when you were like, hey, I'm really gravitating towards this? Was it always playing, or was it really a record, a person in your life?
It was honestly, I think at first it was, Sesame Street, but then it was also seeing street performers in the city, just all different kinds of stuff, like, and so that was always really, I don't know, I was always really drawn to that stuff, and I would always like beg my mom to, if they were like selling a CD, I would always like beg my mom to buy the CD,
Oh, wow.
So a lot of my first CDs were street performers in the city. I don't know, when I was in elementary school, I had a babysitter who was kind of goth, and she was listening to a lot of The Cure and Nine Inch Nails and things like that. And I really dug that. I think one of the first CDs, maybe the first CD I ever bought at like a CD shop, was The Cure's Greatest Hits when I was in 4th grade or 3rd grade or something.
Wow, the goth babysitter. Maybe you could have worn a long sleeve like this. Who knows?
Yeah. I could have gone down that road. I think also my I don't know, I was getting into all different kinds of stuff. That's the cool thing about growing up in New York, being exposed to so many different things. I was it just kept it kept kind of always expanding in these other different directions, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up, on Long Island, right by Jones Beach, an hour away, and I mean, I still got a lot of that, even kind of obviously removed from the boroughs and stuff, and just with the ability to come in and out. So being in there the whole time, I can only sort of imagine. So when did you really start playing? When was when did you start crossing that sort of threshold?
Well, besides the elementary school recorder and and then I played trumpet a little bit also. I started drumming when I was probably about 10 years old or 11 years old. My grandfather was a drummer, and I just remember we were having family dinner one night, and somehow it came up, Grandpa Henry playing the drums, and it just kind of like clicked. Why am I playing the trumpet? You know? Uh,
Bro,
so
get this
that's
trumpet out of my face.
yeah. So
I actually
yeah.
remember you one time showing me at your place. I think it was your grandfather's snare drum.
I have his brushes. I have a snare drum that he bought. Well, because I worked at Manny's Music when I was 7 live back then. He came in and bought a snare drum for me live.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
I also had his old hi hats which was a huge bummer. They got stolen from a gig.
That was it. It was the hi hats. I think there was an issue there, and
Yeah,
it was in
yeah,
that zone, which is a huge, 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 huge bummer. But that's where I thought I'm like, I honestly, that's where I was like, oh, Greg comes from like a musical family, you know. Believe it
not
or not,
really.
I don't interview my friends when we're hanging out. So
Yeah, sure.
this is a fun way to like learn some stuff about obviously about you and stuff. So your grandfather was sort of you kind of learned that, and that was kind of like a tipping point. Like maybe I should try it out because it kind of runs in the family, kind of thing.
Well, yeah, yeah. I think kind of. I mean, he didn't play professionally, and nobody else in my family plays an instrument or is really expressively creative. Um, so just, I don't know. I loved music, and um, it just something. I get, yeah. It kind of it dawned on me that somehow I'd like skipped over the most closely accessible option. Um, Although growing up in New York City, also the least accessible option, because who has a drum set in their apartment when they grow up? You know. So
Exactly. That's what I was like always curious of. I'm like space is at a premium. So how did you really start playing and engaging in the practice?
I had I started taking lessons with somebody who was teaching at, it was a classical music kind of school of some kind, but this percussion teacher agreed to give me trap kit lessons. So I was doing that with him, and I had a practice pad that I would practice on. Um, and so that was kind of how I did it for the first 2 or 3 years or so, is just only playing kit when I was either taking these lessons or at, once or twice a year at my grandfather's house, or anybody else who ever had a drum set, when I was really super beginner. And then the big thing was when I got bar mitzvahed, I got some bar mitzvah money. I used that to buy an electric kit.
Hey, all
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Here we go.
yeah.
That's
So
beautiful. That's
that's how I got, really, that's how I got my first kit, and then I was able to play at home because I had the
you
electric
became a
kit.
man and you got a drum kit all in the
Same
same
time,
day.
just like that.
Unbelievable. What a
And it's
story.
been the same way ever since.
Yeah. Amazing. A true rite of passage.
Yeah.
So that must have been obviously like a great moment because right now when you're saying a trap kit, is that mostly like just snare and hi hat kind of?
Drum set.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And then when you sort of were doing that, what were like your tastes that you're starting to probably develop on your own at that point, right? It's like now you're starting to really have feelings on what you like in the world. What were you kind of starting to listen to and to feel like I want to drum like this one or that one?
At the beginning, I was playing along to hip hop records.
Sick.
It was all hip hop. Yeah, because that I got really deeply into Wu-Tang Clan, BC Boys, Biggie, definitely primarily East Coast stuff, but yeah, I was really into that, and so I was just playing backbeats along, and then also some like kind of more, I don't know, classic rock kind of stuff like Jimi Hendrix and Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. I was kind of playing along with a little bit too, and I would just, if I heard a lick, I would just try to copy it.
Totally. I mean, and those records obviously are sampling some like absolutely insane players too.
Oh, for sure.
So to get like feel and pocket groove and presence and like, yeah, you think about the way that RZA samples or DJ Premier or the Blaze, all absolute bona fide legends of the game and what they sort of bring to it. And yeah, a really great education in that. And that's one thing that I think that a lot of people, I think when they associate you with your drumming, it's about all the different time signatures and the different things that you sort of do there. But I'm like, my man's got feel. Do not get it fucked up. My man's got a lot of feel, which was something that when I first saw you play really came through, even though the technicality and like the speed and everything else that you were bringing to the table was there. There was a real strength and a flow to it, which is like really hard to do, like Dave Lombardo does that, like Thomas Hawk does that. There's not too many people who can do that. So when did you really kind of start breaking out of the mold of like, hey, I'm like chilling in my room or like taking some lessons and stuff to go and start, I'm playing with other people, I want to maybe form a band? What would that look like in a young Greg Fox's mind?
Well, I had a band in high school and we played CBGBs a couple times and stuff like that, but I was still not, it was deeply not something I really had any sense that there'd be any kind of future with at that moment. It was when I had this job working at Manny's when I was like 17. I kind of,
Can you explain Manny's a little bit for the people maybe not from around here?
Yeah, so Manny's was a very classic, multi-generationally owned mom and pop music shop in the city that kind of predated and also set the model for Guitar Center and Sam Ash in a way. It was, Sam Ash was originally a mom and pop shop also, so I'm not sure on who, which came first, but basically, yeah, they had multiple different departments, the guitar department, drums department, etc. And, musicians working there historically. And, Manny's was a very special place. It had pictures, autograph photos of all these like super famous, beloved musicians on the walls. And yeah, so I got a job working there in 2003, which was the same, like right at the same time Sam Ash bought the business from the family, the Goldrich family, who had owned it and started it. And anyway, that's a whole other story. When I was working there, I met a number of people who were super influential for me. The main one is a drummer named Guy Licata. And Guy was working there at the time, and I studied.
Long Island.
Yeah.
The fucking building.
Yeah.
Guy, know that. And also Walter Scheifel, shout out to you. He's like, Manny's was the OG. Walter knows.
Hey, Walter.
Walter. Yeah. I know Guy too, actually. Kind of random.
Yeah. It's true, Walter. It's true. Sam Ash. After Sam Ash bought Manny's, they used to come in. I'd be in the middle of a sale, and the salesperson would come in and go, "Actually, I need that," and they would take it, and we would be out of stock, and they would take the last thing and sell it at their shop. Yeah, it's wild.
That's fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. The coolest thing about that job was meeting the people I met, and Guy was amazing for me in two ways. One, he was studying and teching for Jojo Mayer at the time, so he taught me all that hand stuff. And then he also, you know, in that world was also deep into jungle and drum and bass. And so he and some of the other folks who worked at Manny's who were drum and bass DJs would sneak me into these parties that they were playing because I was still underage. And I was experiencing this whole kind of like, kind of sadly, that it was the tail end of that, that sort of period of that music being prominent in the city, but I caught the end of it. And so learning to play that kind of music and learning that hand technique, this kind of mini molar and molar specific hand movement, hand motion, and spending all day at a drum shop on a practice pad practicing, that's when it really took a huge jump.
Yeah, and mentally as well, I'm sure, like listening to those records, trying to break them down, understand them. There's so much movement in the drums of like, you know, a drum and bass record versus like an in the pocket, more hip hop record. And one thing I really like about this progression so far too is that it's a little bit out of like, hey, I saw this band and this band and this band kind of thing. These are kind of genres that people might associate as like electronic genres even, and I'm like, that's not really true. Go find a video of Greg playing or Guy playing, and you can see that, you know.
Yeah, it's I mean, you're playing breaks, right? But then the other thing too is, I mean, I'm kind of skipping over the fact that I saw bands like The Locust and Lightning Bolt and Emperor when they were in town while I was in high school, you know, and Albatross and Daughters and you know, Arab on Radar and Wolf Eyes and DMBQ, you know, Need New Body, like all these bands that just would, you know, growing up in the city, right? Everybody was coming through.
And I think at that time too, it was a really sort of experimental time where people who are involved in like punk and hardcore and metal subgenres really trying to, especially like I think like in the United States, were really trying to push the boundaries of what those things meant. Justin Pearson, who's been on the show, Alexis Marshall from Daughters, right? And like what they were doing with that, and just seeing where it could kind of go. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that was bringing in maybe some other kind of rhythmic, odd meter kind of you know things, along with other kinds of sound cylinders. Escape Plan, of course, comes to mind, and things of that nature. And I think that was something that, you know, started to sort of be pushed in the underground. So it's interesting for you to make those two correlations between like the drum and bass stuff and that as well, because it seemed like it was this sort of pervasive things about amongst a ton of different subcultures. And actually, one of my good, you know, buddies, Ben Wyman, he talks a lot to me about like, yeah, I just listen to like IDM and weird electronic music, drum and bass, and like the most violent hardcore he can find. And when you start thinking about that, you're like, oh man, that kind of makes sense for the guy who wrote Calculating Infinity, maybe, you know?
No doubt. And that's why I loved that record when it came out, you know, although it came out before I started getting into any kind of drum and bass or jungle stuff at all. I mean, that was the thing. When I was in high school, it was such a great time for music. And I mean, I went to the Oops Tour show, which happened at North 6 in Williamsburg before it was Music Hall Williamsburg. And I went because I knew The Locust and I liked them. And I hadn't heard of any other bands. The other bands were Arab on Radar, Wolf Eyes, and Lightning Bolt. And I saw all of them for the first time, having never heard of any of them before. Right? So just like friends would say, hey, we should go to this show. Or like a band I knew was coming through and they'd be on the bill with other bands. And it was always something interesting, you know.
Mm-hmm. And I think that this is also, we haven't even talked about the internet once yet, you know, like at that time, it was one thing could open the door to 4 or 5 things, but you really didn't necessarily know all of them, you know. You'd have to buy 5 records to really know if those 5 bands were there, or maybe you read a zine, or maybe, and you're like, oh, I heard these guys are good. Or
and I'd go on a website, I'd like go to Load Records website and listen to every other band on Load Records because I wanted something that affected me like Lightning Bolt did, right? So I would get some of that, but I'd also get things I'd never heard before too. And so, you know, constantly trying to discover new music by association, right? Which is what you're talking about.
Exactly. And just that the fact that it was different, like you could walk into a show. All those things now seem like they might fit together, and like you would know, but not really at the time. I had a funny time where I went to go see Kill Your Idols at Wetlands, and 7 Seconds was playing, and I didn't really know who 7 Seconds was.
Wow, Wetlands was one of my favorite spots. I used to go see music there all the time.
Oh, I loved it too as well. Shout out to our boy Jake from Rocks Up. He used to book there all the time. And
No way.
I got to meet him later on just by doing this job, and I was like, "Whoa, this dude booked Wetlands. He booked some of my favorite shows of all time."
I saw George Clinton play a solo show at Wetlands.
Wow, that's
it was him and a guitarist and a drum machine. Actually, the name of the band was called 420 Funk Mob, and there were probably 30 people. It was in the small room.
Oh, the downstairs?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, yeah, that's wild. That's crazy.
Yeah.
It was a really nice, definitely time in New York, especially in Manhattan. Like, Manhattan's changed so much, but in Manhattan, too, there was just so many great clubs and places like that. So when did you start, after you kind of like, were going to these drum and bass parties with Guy, and you felt like you were taking this sort of new leap in your drumming ability? When did you start like thinking, okay, I'm starting to my own stuff now?
Well, the band, all the stuff that I was learning from Guy started to make its way into my playing more, and the music I was doing when I was playing in bands was all like hardcore metal, kind of weird time signature leaning stuff. So trying to think. In college, I had a couple different bands that we never really toured or anything, but in those projects, that's when some of this hand stuff started to actually kind of, go from being just a thing I could do on a practice pad to being a way I actually played the drums, putting that stuff into practice. And then I had a band in college with Tyler, who he and I both we were both in liturgy together, Tyler Dusenberry. We had a college band called Family of Love that was kind of like, I don't know, the like touch points were somewhere between like Sleep and Lightning Bolt, and it was just bass and drums, and we both sang. And we toured with that project a lot. And that was how everything started to go one in front of the other, project-wise and tour-wise and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then it became obviously, I feel like I knew of you first, obviously through liturgy. That's the time period that we met. But a lot of people were just telling me like, this dude is an amazing drummer, and like Anthony, he's been in all these bands, but like he's in this sort of black metal thing now. But you gotta like watch this kid play, like it's nuts. And I still remember the first time I saw you guys was I believe Reannihilation era, and it was just the way that you pushed and pulled the band throughout the set, and like kind of the ebbs and flows with the way you're playing, and really like giving that kind of music catharsis and not just technicality. That brought me into your playing. I was like, that is fucking sick. I was really, kind of taken by that. What was it like to, kind of, it seems like, you can cut, you've been able to cut across a lot of different styles. So what was it like to kind of, start playing more in that black metal sort of realm, and like kind of experimenting with that and coming up with a lot of the playing in that band?
I mean, it was really an amazing challenge, because when we started, the songs were blast beats all the way through, and I was not physically able to do that, so being able to continue to do that, and then do that in a way that was satisfactory for me, required really building some endurance and some muscles, so, and then also similarly, like incorporating this hand technique into doing that was like, I don't know, it was organic, certainly, just as far as like, how do I get my body through this, and then kind of leaning into what I'd learned, but yeah, I mean, I had never had the intention to like be playing that way. You know what I mean? It just, I think, because of joining this band and that being the way that the music was written, it was like, okay, well, I got to figure out how to do this. So
Yeah, like that's the bar. Like I have to kind of meet this sort of physical challenge too, which I think is something that's like always really interesting to me about drums, particularly, as opposed to obviously playing guitar and other things that require physical skill, of course, and nimbleness and like being able to. But like drumming is like like you could be if you play a metal show, it's like running like a hurdles race or something. Like
yeah.
there's a level of physicality that I think people really got to realize that like it requires something out of you.
Well, and it's like anything else. If you keep doing it, you get better at doing it, right? And the bar keeps raising as far as how much what your capacity is, you know.
Yeah.
So you just something that I really enjoyed a lot about playing that music was how much I was constantly able to expand my capability because it was music that stretched, you know, especially because of how expressive the music was and how much it relied on me really, like you said, pushing and pulling things. It was like, how much can I do this? How fast can I go? How hard can I go? You know, like there was always space for that to be stretched more in the music and with the people I was playing with. So, you know.
Was there anything that you did particularly to kind of build yourself up to that level or that satisfactory level for yourself, or was it just like I'm gonna just play?
Just playing, yeah, just playing. That's it. I mean, I didn't get serious about. Yeah, no. I mean, I would if there was something I was trying to do better, I'd go to the practice pad and really hone it. But mostly it was just practicing playing the music and the other music I was playing with other people, and I don't know. There was, I think also to a certain degree, some level of at the time having being at the beginning of like a kind of music career and trying to, um, you know, I don't know. It's especially I think in this realm where you're playing this music that's so intense and fast and heavy. Like there's constantly this drive to try to do it faster and heavier, and so I think that I was kind of like defining myself uh, and kind of like running as fast as I could, sort of towards I don't know, kind of like making an impression in a way. Like this is something I was
Yeah, and I
kind
think
of
that's when you're talking about extremity in music. I mean, that's what you have to do. You're pushing the boundary, and that's never an easy thing. There's a lot of amazing, people working on the edges to expand outwards, right? And so that's always really true. And so obviously, liturgy got a lot of notoriety, and therefore it meant your playing got a lot of notoriety. I feel like that was the moment where it was like, okay, this band's here, and then every article would have a standout drummer, right? Like or like moments where they talk about this, and then I feel like you started getting phone calls, right? Like I feel like Ben Frost happened after that. There was a couple other things happening. What was it like to start feeling the notoriety of the band, but also then people being like, I want to work with this drummer like as its own sort of entity as well. How did that sort of transition happen when like kind of band happened and didn't? There was a hiatus or two. But how did it sort of feel for you to also be like, wow, I have a bunch of people wanting to work with me, and that's pretty amazing.
Well, throughout this whole time, I was also playing drums for Dan Deacon, right, which is like an entirely different world, right?
I totally forgot about that.
So I played drums for Dan for like 5 years, and
crazy. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, so
there's a lot of stuff, Greg. It's hard. I'm trying to chart the course here. It's like,
yeah. Oh, quick drum and bass recommendation is check out Refreshers. Okay. Refreshers is the name of the producer. So I was playing with Dan. The Ben thing, Ben Frost, Liturgy got booked to play Iceland Airways Festival, and Ben lives out there. Ben asked us. Ben basically hired Liturgy, sort of, or hired. We got hired to come into the studio and do some tracking for a project he was working on. which ended up, I think, not becoming anything. But then he called me back to come back to help write a record, and it was me and Shazada Smiley writing and recording, and then we went on tour. We did a lot of touring for a couple of years.
I saw some, and it was brilliant. It was
yeah. So that, you know, and I right around when so getting asked to write and record and tour with Ben happened after I quit liturgy the first time, yeah, other things kind of happened. People expressed interest in doing things together. Yeah, I think at the time, I'm trying to remember, because I was doing all these, there's always a lot going on, but I also joined Z's kind of around then. So I was playing with Ben and Z's, and I'm trying to think, you know, these one-off things would happen here and there, and I was kind of very much beginning to develop a kind of solo thing too.
It was kind of going kind of in and out. You had certain collaborations sort of on the table, and then I know that, you know, at a certain point, you know, yeah, you had left liturgy, and then.
And I also started my own project. I started Guardian Alien, so we were touring a lot too.
And then there was Guardian Alien, right. There was Z's. You were playing with Ben Frost, and to me, I was like, wow! All of a sudden, Greg's popping up here with like multiple projects. I was really happy for you to sort of see a lot of that stuff happening, and I was like, so deserved, really cool. And again, like you're doing liturgy, you were playing with Dan Deacon, you played with Ben Frost, you were cutting across a lot of different genres, able to sort of just, you know, there's a Gregness to all of it, but able to kind of cut across a lot of stuff and do that. And that's, I think, a really complimentary thing. I feel like I can hear you on a record, but it doesn't need to dominate it. Or I can really just hear you and listen to GDFX or Greg Fox solo stuff, and I'm like, wow, this is beautiful in its own right when it wants to be more front and center. Mm-hmm. So you start doing that, and then liturgy sort of comes back into play. But then when did you really start doing the modular stuff? I always wanted to know kind of how that happened, because up until this point, I'm like, this dude's an amazing drummer and brilliant. He's working with these amazing people. And then I remember seeing you play with Z, seeing something else, and then I was like, oh, I'm going to the show, but Greg's not playing drums. What the fuck is he going to do, you know?
Yeah.
And then you started playing the modular set, and it was improvised and beautiful and really cool. So how did you start kind of adding that into your musical practice?
I mean, I've been interested in experimental and electronic music all the way through, and I think I always was messing around with computer music and hardware, and I had Electribes that I had a like discount when I worked at Manny's, so I would buy gear. Like I bought drum machines.
Manny's discount, baby.
Yeah, that's how I got my drum. I mean, the kit that I still play is the kit I bought the day I quit that job. But yeah, but I mean, I always was into that kind of stuff, and you know, like I said, listening to drum and bass and jungle, and like paying attention to a lot of like DJs and stuff like that. And I had like I was playing shows as GDFX with these Electribes, and like, you know, somebody broke into my car and stole the Electribes, and then I ended up messing around with samplers, SP555 and 404, and like learning all that stuff, messing around with all that stuff. And you know, I mean, I was also always recording at home. I mean, I always played guitar and bass. Also, I was always teaching myself other instruments. So, the modular thing happened because literally I was living for a period of time with some friends, one of whom was running a synthesizer shop in the city called Detective Squad that was in the back of Silent Barn, the most recent iteration of Silent Barn. And these guys who ran a company from Czechia, they're from Brno, and they had a company called Bostel. They were making modules, and they would come stay with us and like bring stuff to the shop. And I think they were involved in like running, or they co-owned the shop. And I became friends with these guys, and one day they were like, we have this module we're working on that you can use to convert like drum hits either from the drum with a contact mic on it or from a drum pad, it'll convert that to gates, to CV gates that then you can use to send through a modular system. And so they were like, here, we have a prototype we want to give you, as well as a bunch of other modules so you can learn how it all works, so that you can demo it for us.
Oh,
So they gave me a bunch of stuff, and that's when I started to, and right at the same time, I was booked to play Moog Fest, and they wanted me to do a durational performance. And my idea for that performance was because I was already using sensory percussion at the time also, which is a different thing that another friend created and got me into. But sensory I was using at the time, but I had the idea to run, Moog had just put out the Mother 32, right? And my idea was to send MIDI from the sensory system into a bunch of Mother units that then other people could come on stage and plug their Eurorack systems into. So I did like this 4-hour-long performance where people were coming on stage and leaving with their cases, plugging into these Mothers that were receiving MIDI from the sensory world. So like all this kind of happened at the same time, and I got really into the process of how you patch and make a circuit, and the quality, the sort of creative process of making music with modular synthesis. So I got really into it, and luckily had friends who ran companies that made the stuff, so I was able to get some stuff. And I mean, also at the time I had a part-time job as the sort of main music curator at Pioneer Works, so I had a part-time job income, which allowed me also to dive into this not inexpensive hobby a little more.
Sure. And what's interesting about this too, or what I think, and to me it's interesting because it's coming still out of your playing, right?
Yeah.
And it very much, this story is really coming out of that and being like, oh, the way that Greg plays, this sort of familiarity with different styles and things. These manufacturers, these people creating these more sort of experimental synthesis kind of vehicles, they think of you, right? They're like, oh, this motherfucker over here can show us if this thing could really happen, which must have been like a pretty cool honor to be like, you're like the test pilot,
Oh, I feel like there's this weird way in which I tend to be the test pilot for a lot of things. It's like a karmic thing. I don't know, but yeah, I'm glad that I'm the person that gets thought of to do that. That's cool, I think.
Absolutely. I think it's a testament to your playing and also to your creative mind of how we can push these things, forward. And anyone who's made electronic music before too, there's a million ways to do any one thing.
Yeah.
And so just finding different creative ways of doing that, and then bringing that into the drumming and your practice and stuff, which really ended up becoming the basis for your solo project, which is really like the main thing that is now carrying you, through this time, though you're playing with other people and stuff like that. So I wanted to touch a little bit on Contact. You put out that record this year. It's a beautiful record. I totally love it. Really, you can feel the progression between the modular and the stuff that you're doing there, and also there's a level of like, it's not gear fetishism. It's creating texture, sound, song on this particular level. And I think for what you're doing stylistically, it like particularly works. What was it like to kind of get that record together? How did you kind of bring it together to record it? And also, just coming up with kind of the palette for it, because I feel like it has certain movements, and sometimes I'm like, wow, this is really raw. Just I'm listening to drumming, and it's kind of refreshing to just listen to drumming. And was like, wow, there's a nakedness there a little bit, where I'm like, whoa, this is 4 minutes later, and I'm happy with it. I'm like, cool, but it like hits me. I'm like, I'm just listening to Greg drum. This is fucking sick, So, talk to me about some of those choices.
Well, the biggest choice about that record was to make it with Randall Dunn. Randall's a very close friend, and also, I'm a big fan of his work and have been for a long time. So the opportunity to make this with him as the producer and as the engineer uh, was a that was the choice. Um, I had prepared some palettes and some sort of sound worlds that I knew would be on the record, and we knew also that a lot of what ended up being the record would be determined while we were in the studio together. That was part of what we discussed in advance. So I went into it that way, trusting my friend to help me do something that would be beyond what I would come up with on my own. Um, and Randall contributed so much. I mean, the idea to record those tracks of just drumming was his idea, you know. And I ended up feeling like they were kind of my favorite part. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say they're my favorite pieces on the record, but my favorite thing about the record is how vulnerable it is, and it's because of that input from him. Also the decision to process all of the sensory percussion through outboard gear, right? So you're only on maybe for one moment in the whole record do you hear just the raw sensory percussion sound, the digital sound. It's always being processed through, various pieces of hardware, right? Whether they're like rack equipment or a Leslie speaker, right? So that was, Randall. That up until recently has not been my world. Now that I'm running a studio, that's expanded. But that was the main thing. I mean, when it comes to putting the like individual sound worlds together, I really adhere to a creative process that's kind of like oriented around sort of like throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? I start with one thing that I like, and then I try to see what I can fit around it that also makes sense in some kind of relationship, and also maintains a feeling of emotional resonance for me as I'm putting it together. And I just kind of keep adding stuff to that until I feel like it's balanced and conveying something that feels like it feels like it's done, when it kind of is telling me that I don't need to do anything else, And then
like organic endpoint.
Yeah, and then that whole world of sound gets explored by the way I play. The gestures I make on the drum activate the relationships between some of those different sounds in ways that I can kind of revisit and change and kind of rearrange however I want to when I'm doing that's kind of the consistent through line of the solo music that I make, really.
The correctness of it all, if we will.
That's the name of the next record.
My technical term. No, but I think that's really cool. It's almost like I like this idea of like your own like sort of like palette sound worlds or something. It's like, hey, on this day I'm just gonna inhabit that, and that's cool. And then I'm gonna just kind of improvise and let it take me. But you kind of let Randall also create that environment for you, and for you to sort of just like grow and do it. And that's kind of really, I mean, really brave, to me, like as a musician too, to just, hey, the trust of Randall is really cool. That's one level of it, but the other of it is just like, I'm gonna, some people like to be really planned out about certain things or hit certain things, but for you, and that's what I think really comes across in how the playing makes you feel. There's an organicness to it that, like, on tape, it feels like I see you. And actually, some of the solo drumming stuff actually brought me back to one of my favorite performances. I've seen you play a lot, and one of my favorite performances that I've ever seen you do was at Basilica, and it was the year that Swans played. And you, so to set the scene for our viewers, Basilica is just that. It's a big church. It's a big basilica, and there's a big stage at the end, and then there's a second floor with an office that had like an opening that would go out onto this hall that holds about maybe 700 people, this basilica, right? And there was, Greg was listed as a performing artist. There was like these different artists that would perform, but you didn't really, at that time, you didn't really like know where they would be. Maybe there was a smaller room, the big room, and then like wherever. And so,
and Guardian actually played earlier that night too. We were like the second band that night. Yeah.
Earlier on the main stage.
Right.
So Greg was there. We knew Greg was there because I had already seen Greg play And then all of a sudden, on the second floor, this sort of industrial door opening, and there's a spotlight on Greg. And all of a sudden, like 500 people, 600 people turn around here, and it's just Greg playing drums on the second floor of the Basilica. And it was so cathartic and amazing, and the response to people, and it was just drumming, in its purest form, but it was beautiful, and people fucking lost it. Like, they were dancing, they were having a great time. Like, it just brought like an energy that was unexpected where you were. How is it kind of like, I feel like you've now also become, besides like the pilot, the test pilot for the the wild, like, MIDI sensory percussion, whatever, frontier of drumming thing. I feel like you get commissioned, you get asked to do like these very interesting performances. You've done one with Tyon Braxton. I saw you doing a bunch of stuff, commissioned one-off things, and I feel like that was kind of early on in your development of that. What's that stuff like, and why do you get asked to do all of it? Is it because you inhabit that in your playing, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a unique approach to playing the drums as a solo instrument. And I also think that I'm simultaneously pretty good at playing with other people. So, like the thing I did with Ty, that we were supposed to open for Square Pusher the day after my birthday this year, which was a bummer. Not to
so mad. You shouldn't have
yeah.
told me that. And
I know.
That's crazy.
It'll happen. Kato Man is here. First of all, what's up? And he's asking about Sabbath, so we should probably just to my homie in Tokyo. But shout out, man. I just want to say hey, and I can't wait to finally come back and see you again. But the Thai thing was us just being like, wouldn't it be sweet if we played together? And that was it. I mean, I think regarding some of this other commission stuff, like getting asked to do scores for people's art pieces or things like that, I love doing that kind of stuff. It's really fun for me, and I think I get to draw on all the different kind of influences I have, and at the same time be experimental and expressive and mess around with process in a way, which is kind of what my real medium is. And let something emerge that doesn't have to fit like into some kind of predetermined idea. So I think that's why I like doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's cool, and I think it almost sharpens this skill, like you said, that like the process skill. So when you kind of go into recording your own records, you're just like a well-conditioned athlete. You're like, I don't know how the game's gonna go, but I'm gonna play the game, and I have all the tools, the athletic ability to perform well in that moment. And I feel like that's a really different and interesting approach to music. So, Kado, let's talk about the Sabbath cover band, because of course I wanted to get there, because it seems so atypical even for yourself. And now you come back and then you're like, hey, I'm gonna grab a bunch of friends and we're gonna do this Sabbath band. How did that even happen? I mean, we booked it a bunch of Vitus. It's fucking great. Sounds awesome, and it's just so fucking fun.
Yeah.
Like, that's really the key, right? It's like, yes, Greg, you're brilliant guy, but you're also so fun, so full of life. I love that. And you're like, hey, all of a sudden, here we are with this Sabbath band, cover band, with Nick Zinner, Brad Truax, Angel Dorian, right? Who am I missing?
Mick.
Nick, yes. Mick Bar. Nick, yes, of course. So, from Crowless, amazing dude. So, how did that happen?
Angel and I had already previously been in a couple of Sabbath cover bands on our own. I was in one years ago with a bunch of friends, and even Liturgy for 1 year at Death by Audio covered a bunch of Sabbath songs for like a Halloween show. And then Angel had done one too with other people. And we were friends. We would talk about how much we love Sabbath pretty regularly, and always talk about doing it in some capacity together, kind of half as a joke and half seriously. And then we were doing a residency together in Germany at the end of 2018. and Nick was there also. And the whole kind of idea was all these different artists come together and make some new music together and da-da. And, I think that a lot of the music, not all of, but a lot of the musicians who were there were kind of more in a mainstream, kind of more folky leaning, kind of contemporary kind of style. And me, Angel, and Nick were feeling like a little confused about what we were doing there. And after a couple of days of going back and forth and talking about, we should just do this, we should just do Sabbath, let's just do Sabbath, let's just do Sabbath. Finally, we were outside one day and Nick was like hanging out with us and we were like, we were just talking about doing Sabbath over here. He's like, let's do it. So we went into a room because we had gear set up and stuff. We went into a room and we started playing. We all knew all the same shit. We knew it all already. So we got two other people to play with us there, one of which was Shazad, who I also do XI with and played with Ben with and all that. And we had another guy, this guy Jeremy, who lives in Minneapolis, who's like an absolute unbelievable shredder, who like sits in with folks who play with Prince in Minneapolis regularly. But anyway, we would play in the lobby of this hotel we were staying at this residency every night, and there were probably like 5 or 6 people who were really pissed about it, but everybody else really loved it. And it was like this super fun thing. And so when I guess there was some footage of it, and when we got back to New York, there was some interest in us doing it in New York. And, Shazad was just very busy with all the other things he does, and Jeremy was in Minneapolis. So we asked Brad and Mick, they said yes, played a show, and then it became like the best band I've ever been in, pretty much.
And I have to say, I'm really excited and a little horrified that when one of my friends has a Black Sabbath cover band, I'm the first phone call, and I appreciate it. Great. So, those nights are great, and I think that we were all kind of like really stoked and shocked at like how kind of insane the response was. It was awesome. I'm like, you guys are Black Sabbath now.
Yeah. Well, Black Sabbath isn't playing anymore, so we are. I don't think. I'm usually more humble, but I think we're the best Black Sabbath.
Wow. Currently on planet Earth.
Yeah.
You heard it here, folks. I like it. Bold claim, and we will have you defend the throne when
happy to.
When things are a little bit safer and cooler for us to all play. So we got a couple of minutes left, like about 5 minutes or so, and of course I want to touch on XI. So XI is, I think, such an amazing band, and something that is really such a unique palette in the world of like metal, brass in metal. Maybe you shouldn't have thrown away the trumpet all those years ago. I don't know. But
I can still play pretty good free jazz trumpet, but that's it.
That's all right. What was that band? About to blow up the Eiffel Tower, maybe. But yeah, I mean, when I first heard it, I was really blown away, and I loved all these sort of like low oozing textures from the brass, and then legitimate riffage, legitimately heavy drums, like really cool. And it gave it such a beautiful atmosphere, a heavy atmosphere, but in a way that I feel like, I mean, only brass really gives you that. And you guys, the way that you were playing with that, how did that project come together with Colin and the rest of those folks? And like, honestly, I'm like out of breath. How much shit do you do? Like, we have like,
we haven't even covered all of it.
In an hour. I'm like,
I know. Well, I mean, XI came together because Colin and I had become friends, and Shazad and Colin had worked together before. Me and Shazad were working together, and Shazad and I were doing Sorrow with Colin, which was his reworking of the Goretzky's Third Symphony. We made a record doing that and toured that a lot. And, we've been talking about doing like a metal thing. And Colin like loves Meshuggah, and so do I. And, and then he had this friend from high school, Toby Summerfield, who's played in a ton of bands and is actually pretty deeply connected to the New York and Chicago music scenes. And, we got together. What did we do? We would just book time at Shazad's studio and write. We spent we had like two week-long periods writing that record. And that was that. I mean, we've been touring that record for like, I don't know, 3 years now, maybe more. 3.
Yeah, and the last time, I mean, we had a show this year.
One of the last shows I played this year.
Yeah, which is almost like a hard thing to even think about. Like it feels almost like so long ago, but I was like, I've seen Greg actually play music this year, and XI played it, and it was fucking
Yeah,
great, and I
it
was
was a good
so
show.
happy. Yeah, it was so I was so happy to see it happen, and have a bunch of people at the show, really enjoy it, and I feel people keep coming back, even though it's not obviously same record or like as prolific, but it's such a palette and it's such a moment, and when you see the performances too, they shift and move. It's a performance to see. It's really nice with the songs that you have, but it's also nobody's really giving me that atmosphere in that particular way. So I think people really like to come back to it, and it's really brilliant. So totally dig that.
Yo, it's cool. I mean, it's great getting to write music with and work with people who I admire and respect so much as musicians and as people. Both. And Colin and Toby and Shazad, and really for that matter, to be honest with you, everybody I play music with these days are people who I feel that way about. I have a lot of admiration for them as people. Um, that's become a really important guiding principle for me about the kind of projects I do and the people I work with is how what it feels like to be in their presence and how I feel when I'm no longer in their presence. Also, after spending time working together, touring together, writing together, do I feel like, oh God, I need a break from this person? Or do I feel like energized by them and excited to hang out the next time and tour the next time and write music the next time? I have to do it that way. I just absolutely have to do it that way. So that's kind of
Sure.
like the rule I follow, for the work that I do.
And I think that I think that it feels that way in your playing too, and your approach, and you see it really come from like someone who does so much and so prolific. I feel like you have to have that sort of kind of like centering sort of thing where you're like, okay, this is the bandwidth, this is what I got, and I want to take, you kind of create a little bit of like, this is where I need things to be in order to kind of continue on, and it's a really good thing for people who've been watching, hanging out, and listening to Grace play with some of the most amazing people and different folks all over the place too. But it's kind of this energy that continues to kind of go in on itself and kind of build and carry. And I really think that in a lot of ways, that's the main stuff that brings you to the places where you want to go, and to judge those things accordingly. And then you can grow organically, and
Yeah.
be, you could go work a lot of shitty jobs in the world if you want, but this is maybe something different.
Well, and if playing music is 75% of what I do with my time and professionally, it's very important to me that I do it with people who make me feel 100% good about it to the degree that's possible. I mean, obviously there are instances where, you know, there are hills and valleys in all circumstances, but generally speaking, I have to operate that way because the other 25% of what I do is running a studio, being a teacher, and being a coach. And like, I need to have a lot of capacity I need to be very available to the people I'm working with in those regards. And if the music work isn't energizing for the very most part, then it's going to detract from all the work I'm trying to do with individual people on this other side of my work, which like we haven't talked about it at all. And it's a huge and very important part of what I do with my time, and my energy. So like back, keeping it to the music world, like it's the number one most important lesson I've learned is like, if you want to eat dinner with the people after you finish playing the gig, then they're the right people.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing too, because music is relationships in a lot of ways, and sometimes, yes, of course,
yeah.
there's hard relationships that might be fruitful, of course, like artistically in one way, but are they going to give you the things that you need to continue like moving forward and creating something that feels sustainable for your life? And I think that that's something, when you say coaching, you do say it's we're talking about life coaching.
Yeah.
And so it's something that's really cool about you, because you're not just thinking about things from like a project to project or record to record basis, but you're like, I'm organizing my life. Like the unit of analysis is Greg Fox's life, and music and these things fitting into those things. And that's really, if you're trying to endeavor into making just making and creating and doing things, you're going to have to try and figure those things out. And I, as your friend, have definitely learned, felt those things from you. I've gotten some cool advice. I've just seen too. I just watched, and I've been like, oh wow, great force of nature. And I love that. And I think it's really important to sort of see and sort of feel. And like as people talk, it's like one thing that we get out of this program is just seeing that arc, and it's been a great arc to explore. And Greg, thanks for joining us, man. It's been just a wonderful hour catching up with a friend, having a little red wine, and just enjoying everything. So thank you.
Yeah, man. Thank you. I miss you.
I miss you too, man. Absolutely. And hopefully sooner than later we can make some music. We can hang out, and
that's another band we didn't talk about.
Yeah, man, but we're gonna save that for later on. It's percolating here after listening to Contact.
Yeah. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Go check out Greg's new record, Contact. It's fucking great, and like the other 27 bands and shit are awesome too. Oh, and also Greg's a DJ too, so check him on 8 Ball Radio
every Wednesday from 1 to 3 New York time on 8 Ball Radio. 8ballradio.nyc.
Like a true New Yorker, he's got many hustles. Please explore them all right? Take care.
Peace.
Later, dude.
Good night.